The high-ceilinged chamber of the Galactic Council was a void of judgment. Vast and silent, it stretched before Jesse Kane like the maw of an ancient predator. The glass walls offered no view of the world beyond, leaving only the dull hum of the station's core as a reminder that they weren't entirely disconnected from reality. Jessie stood at the center of the Grand Chamber, flanked by her diplomatic aides, 3 men and a woman from Earth's newly established space service. A sea of alien faces surrounded them, each species unique, their bodies cloaked in differing hues, shapes, and materials. The atmosphere was tense, palpable, almost suffocating. For centuries, humanity had fought for its place here, among the stars. Today, it would be decided whether Earth had a seat at the table, or if they would be cast aside. In the front, high above, the Grand Emissary Corvus sat in his exalted position, his insectoid face glowing in the faint light. His compound eyes gleamed with the weight of his decision, already looking down at her with thinly veiled disdain. He was the first to speak. His voice reverberated across the chamber in an oddly musical tone. "Humanity's inclusion in the Galactic Council has been difficult," he began, his insectoid mouth barely moving. "We have observed their progress for over a century. But today, after extensive deliberation, we shall proceed with a decision that will finally place them where they belong." Jessie's jaw clenched, but she kept her gaze fixed on the podium before her, resisting the urge to glance at the delegates. She knew the procedure. The council would vote first. The fate of humanity would be decided in a matter of moments. There was no time to waste on idle words. The vote was inevitable. The result almost certain. Corvus raised a clawed hand. "Let it be known that the Galactic Council has voted to officially declare the species Earthborn subordinate. Effective immediately, Earth will be barred from full participation in Council decisions. Their influence," he sneered, "will be limited." The words hit like a hammer. Jessie's heart raced, but she kept her face calm, her expression neutral. She couldn't show weakness. Not now. The chambers erupted in murmurs, like ripples in a pond disturbed by a stone. Her mind spun, calculations, strategies, and emotions warring within her. Earth, once considered an ally of the galaxy's powers, now reduced to a pawn. She stood tall, her voice steady when she finally spoke, breaking the silence. "Grand Emissary," Jessie said, projecting her voice with practiced precision, "I appeal to the Council's sense of reason. You may have voted to place Earth in a subordinate position, but that is a mistake. A grave mistake." The murmurs quieted, and the faces of the delegates turned toward her. They were curious now, waiting to see how the human envoy would respond. Some had already written off humanity, their minds set. Others, like the Zernath, a silicon-based race, observed silently, their massive black eyes unreadable. "You speak of mistakes, human." Corvus's voice slithered with condescension. "We have made no mistake. You are a species that still bickers over primitive notions of national pride and territorial boundaries. You are a fledgling civilization. This vote is not a personal insult. It is a decision made for the peace and stability of the galaxy." Jessie's hands were trembling, but she clenched her fists to stop them. She had prepared for this. She had known this moment would come. Humanity, in its youth and brashness, was misunderstood, but that didn't mean they were incapable. This was a challenge, not an end. She took a steadying breath before continuing. "Grand Emissary, you are right about one thing," Jessie said, her voice cold but unwavering. "We are young. But we've been through more in a century than most species have in millennia. We are a species of survivors. We don't yield. We rise." She stepped forward, drawing the attention of the room, her sharp eyes now scanning the faces of the council. "You speak of peace and stability, yet you've never had to fight for survival. You've never been pushed to the brink, forced to defend every inch of your existence. We've had no choice but to fight. And that makes us stronger than you could ever understand." Her words hung in the air like a challenge, daring them to dispute her. The tension in the room thickened. Ikor's eyes narrowed, and he raised his hand again, signaling the chamber to fall silent. "A convenient argument, but a misguided one," he said, his tone cold as ice. "Survival alone does not make a species worthy of respect. Power, influence, stability. These are the measures that determine a species' place in the galaxy. Not your trivial notion of rising. We've seen what your species is capable of, and it is not enough." Jessie's lips tightened into a thin line, but she didn't back down. "Respect is earned. You don't get it by wielding power alone. You get it by demonstrating something deeper: resilience, ingenuity, unity." She took another step forward, her voice ringing out. "Humanity may not have your advanced technology or your centuries-old wisdom, but we've achieved more in a short span than you could have ever imagined. And we won't be subjugated without a fight." For a moment, there was a stillness in the air. The murmurs had stopped. The faces of the council were unreadable. Ikor Voss's gaze was fixed on Jessie, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty passed across his features. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, a voice interrupted. "A vote has been cast. The decision stands." The voice belonged to Graxel, the High Representative of the Vrel, a reptilian race. His voice was thick and deep, but there was no room for debate. Jessie turned toward him. "We're not finished here, Graxel. You can't just erase a species' dignity with a vote. Not like this." The council shifted uncomfortably. Ikor stood abruptly, his sharp claws clicking against the floor as he raised his voice in the air. "Enough. The council has spoken." The finality of the words hit harder than the vote itself. The decision was made. Earth was subordinate. The stakes had never been clearer. Jessie's heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to meet the eyes of every delegate. She wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The battle had only just begun. Jessie Kane stood in the observation room, watching the stars streak past as the council station's engines hummed in the background. She was alone now, the thick steel walls of the room reflecting her thoughts in the quiet. Her mind was a blur, still grappling with the outcome of the vote. Subordinate. A single word that held a universe of meaning. A fate. A condemnation. The decision was done, but it was far from over. Her heart still pounded with the heat of the confrontation. She had spoken from her soul, trying to defend Earth's pride, but it had barely made a ripple in the Council's cold consensus. Grand Emissary Ikor Voss had done what he had set out to do: humiliate them. And yet, Jessie knew that all of this was just a beginning. The real battle was ahead. The human race had survived the unimaginable, and she wouldn't let them be forgotten now. She was interrupted by a soft chime. Turning, she saw General Calhoun, a towering man from Earth's Defense Division, step into the room. His uniform was neat, his face stern, but his eyes told a different story, one of disbelief and frustration. "You didn't expect this, did you?" His voice was low but intense, with the subtle undercurrent of disappointment. "No," she said, her voice steady. "But I won't give up just because they don't understand us." Calhoun crossed his arms. "This was a blatant power play, Jessie. Ikor and the others don't care about diplomacy. They care about control, and they want to show us our place." Jessie nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It wasn't just a rejection, it was a power move. Earth had been a threat to the Council's careful balance, and now they wanted to ensure that humanity would never again pose such a challenge. "What do you think they want, General? What's the endgame here?" Calhoun's brow furrowed. "They'll want us to submit. At best, they'll keep us as a puppet state, just powerful enough to be useful, but not enough to challenge them again." Jessie clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She had to find a way to break through this. She couldn't stand by and let Earth fall into this trap. There had to be a loophole, a crack in their defense, something they had overlooked. But she couldn't do it alone. Not anymore. "Do you know if there's a way to get the vote overturned?" "Something we missed?" she asked. Calhoun hesitated, then shook his head. Not through conventional channels. The council's vote is final. Once they decide, that's it. But, he paused, considering his words carefully. There might be another way. If we can convince just one of the higher-ranking members to question the vote, we might be able to delay the full implementation. But it's a long shot. Jessie's mind raced, piecing together the faces of the council members she had observed. There were a few who hadn't voted with the majority. Delegates from smaller, lesser-known species who had remained silent or withdrawn from the debate. They might be the key, if she could reach them before it was too late. She stood up and turned to face Calhoun. I'll need to speak with them. Find out where they stand. We can't let this pass without a fight. The general's face softened slightly, but his voice remained serious. I'll put together a list of potential allies. You'll need to move quickly, Jessie. If they catch wind of what you're doing, they'll shut you down before you can even speak. I know. Jessie's jaw set with determination. But if we don't fight, we'll lose everything. Earth won't be subjugated. Not on my watch. Later that day, Jessie found herself in a cramped hallway outside the council's secondary meeting chambers. The air was heavy with the weight of her mission. She had already spoken to Sulamir, the Vrel representative who had been quietly observing the events but had said nothing during the vote. She was still waiting on word from Talak, a delegate from the Karate, a peaceful race of aquatic beings who had expressed some initial interest in Earth's technologies. Jessie glanced over the datapad Calhoun had provided her. A list of names, likely sympathizers or those on the fence, was her best shot. She moved down the hall, hoping to find someone willing to listen before it was too late. The doors to the next meeting room slid open, and out stepped Talak, his tall, slender form almost blending into the walls, his skin glistening like the surface of the water on his home planet. The Karate had no eyes, yet they saw everything through sonar, and their language was composed of intricate patterns of sound, a communication they didn't fully share with others. But Talak had always been different. His thoughts on human potential had been surprisingly optimistic. Jessie Kane, Talak said, his voice echoing with a strange rhythm. It is good to see you again, despite the circumstances. Do you have a moment to talk, Talak? She asked, her tone steady, but with a glimmer of urgency. The Karate bowed his head slightly. Of course. I have long wondered what you would do next. The council has made its decision, but I know your heart is not at rest. Jessie nodded. No, it's not. The vote is over, but this isn't the end, Talak. I need your help. If we don't push back now, Earth will lose everything. He was silent for a long moment, and Jessie felt the weight of his contemplation. Finally, Talak spoke. I have always respected the resilience of your species. Your will to survive is unmatched. But the Council is a complex entity, filled with many agendas. You know this. I do, Jessie said. But there must be a way to sway the undecided members. You saw what happened today. They underestimated us. They don't see who we really are. Talak inclined his head. And what do you propose, human? Jessie's voice dropped to a near whisper. I want you to speak. I need your voice to reach the others, the ones who were silent. If we can just get them to speak out, to question the decision, maybe we can stop this before it's too late. Talak's expression remained unreadable, but there was a slight pause before he spoke again. I will consider your request. But be warned, the Council does not take kindly to those who disrupt its harmony. Your actions will have consequences. I'm prepared for that, she said, her voice firm. Talak's deep, sonar-filled gaze met hers. Then I will act, but not without caution. The Council's will is not easily bent. With a final nod, Talak turned and vanished down the hallway, leaving Jessie with the cold weight of his words. The fight had begun in earnest. If they wanted to keep their place in the galaxy, they would have to be prepared for anything. And Jessie was ready. Jessie stood at the edge of the Council's grand observation deck, the stars a glittering sea of cold light stretching infinitely before her. The station hovered above an unknown world, a shimmering ball of blue and green that looked peaceful from here. But Jessie knew better. Beneath the calm surface of this galaxy, forces were stirring, forces that could either save humanity or drown it. She wasn't alone. Sulamir, the Vrel representative who had remained silent during the vote, stood beside her, his broad frame casting a shadow in the dim light. His featureless, black eyes glistened with something close to sympathy. It was the first time Jessie had seen him truly show an emotion beyond the cold neutrality of his species. "You understand what you're asking," Sula said, his voice resonating like a deep vibration, a hum that made the air seem thick. "Disrupting the balance of the council isn't a small matter. The consequences could be severe." Jessie turned to face him, her stance firm. "We don't have the luxury of playing it safe anymore. They've already made their move. Earth's future is at stake. Either we act, or we let them decide for us." Sula's eyes narrowed slightly, as if weighing her words carefully. "I've seen how your people fight. It is a strength, but it is also your weakness. Your emotions are volatile. It's what makes you unpredictable, and it's what makes you dangerous to the established order. I know we're not perfect, but I also know that Earth can't be crushed under the weight of the Council's judgment. We're worth more than that." Jessie's voice had hardened, but there was still a tremor beneath the surface. She could feel it, the weight of their dismissal, the sting of being regarded as inferior. "I just need you to help me convince the others to take a stand. We can't afford silence anymore." Sula tilted his head, studying her with a faint trace of curiosity. "You are asking me to risk everything for a cause that is not even mine. You want the Council to doubt their decision, to question the authority they hold. That is no small task." Jessie met his gaze without flinching. "And that's why I'm asking you. You have power here, more than you realize. The Vrel are respected, even feared. If you speak out, others will listen. We need you to speak for humanity, to show that we won't back down." Sula's silence stretched on, longer than she anticipated. Finally, he spoke again, his tone softer, though still filled with an undertone of caution. "Very well. I will do what I can. But you must understand, this will not be a victory won with words alone. There are other ways to make your presence felt." Before she could ask what he meant, the faint hum of footsteps approached. Jessie turned to see Talak approaching, his smooth, featureless form as elusive as always. His sonar-filled eyes met hers, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something like resolve in his gaze. "I've spoken with others," he said quietly. "Some are undecided, still trying to gauge the pulse of the Council. But there are whispers now, small voices of dissent. We may have a chance, but it is fragile. You must act quickly, Jessie." Her pulse quickened. "What do we do?" Talak's voice dropped, as if the weight of his words could be sensed before they were even spoken. "The Vrel are not the only ones who hold influence. There are factions, rivalries even, among the Council. If you can sway the Gartherii, the insectoid delegates from the outer reaches, they could be key. They have long had disagreements with Ikor and the way the Council has been handling governance. If you can get their support, the others may follow." Jessie's brow furrowed. The Gartherii were a war-hardened race, their reputation for ruthlessness in battle almost as legendary as their disdain for the established order. Yet their methods were often at odds with the more diplomatic factions, making them a wild card in the Council's game. They could either be a key ally or a dangerous adversary. "But can we trust them?" she asked, her voice tight with suspicion. Talak nodded slowly, the rhythm of his voice more deliberate now. "They are motivated by power, not loyalty. But their power comes from creating chaos within the system. Ikor's decision has angered many of them. They will not stand quietly in the face of this subjugation of humanity. If you approach them correctly, they may see an alliance as beneficial." Jessie glanced at Sula, who gave a slow, reluctant nod. The Gartherii's unpredictability could be an advantage. It would be wise to approach them cautiously, but decisively. Jessie didn't need to be told twice. Then we'll do it. We need them on our side. We have no time to waste. The Gartherii delegation was located in one of the darker, more secluded sectors of the station. Their chambers were sparse and stark, lit only by the glow of harsh, industrial lights. As Jessie entered the room, her heart raced in her chest. The Gartherii were notorious for their cold, calculating demeanor. She had only interacted with them once before, and even then, it had been nothing more than a transaction, an exchange of information, an understanding of mutual benefit. But today she needed something far more complicated: their trust. There were 3 of them present, sitting in silence at a low table. Their massive, exoskeletal bodies glistened in the dim light, their numerous limbs folded around them like a protective cage. Croc, the leader of the Gartherii delegation, tilted his head up, his multifaceted eyes narrowing as Jessie approached. "You come at a precarious time, human." Croc's voice was sharp, its buzzing tones carrying an edge of suspicion. "Why should we listen to you? You bring nothing to the table but promises." Jessie met his gaze, refusing to flinch under the weight of his stare. "You were at the vote, Croc. You know what just happened. Humanity has been declared subordinate by the Council. This isn't just an insult, it's a direct challenge to our very existence. I need your help." Croc's many limbs shifted, an expression of amusement, or something close to it, flickering across his face. "And what do you think we stand to gain by aiding you? The Council's decision benefits us as much as it does them. Why should we disrupt the balance?" Jessie stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "Because you hate Ykor. You've disagreed with him for years. You've seen how he's manipulated the Council for his own benefit. This is your chance to show them that you're not just pawns in his game." There was a long silence. Finally, Croc's sharp, clicking laugh echoed through the room. "You're not as naive as you look, human. Perhaps there is something to your words. Very well. We will listen." Jessie exhaled sharply, but she kept her composure. This was just the beginning. A single step, but it was a step in the right direction. The Gartherii could be the spark they needed. Now, they had to turn that spark into a fire. As Jessie walked out of the Gartherii chambers, the weight of the task ahead settled heavily on her shoulders. They had allies, fragile, uncertain ones, but allies nonetheless. She knew the Council's decision wasn't final, not yet. If she could build a coalition, sway enough of the undecided members, perhaps humanity could still turn the tide. But there was no time to waste. The clock was ticking, and the battle for Earth's future had just begun. Jessie stood in the heart of the Council's Grand Assembly Hall, a towering structure of glass and steel that overlooked the vast expanse of the station. The chamber was eerily quiet, save for the subtle hum of energy coursing through its walls. Every seat in the circular chamber was filled with representatives from every corner of the galaxy, their eyes focused on the central dais where Grand Emissary Corvus stood with his usual air of indifference. The same face that had condemned humanity now seemed to radiate a sense of victory. But Jessie wasn't here to witness defeat. She was here to change the course of history. Her mind was sharp, but her body felt like it was made of stone. The weight of everything she had fought for pressed down on her like a physical force. She had gathered allies, small victories in a battle that was only beginning, but the true test was now. The Gartherii had pledged their support, albeit cautiously. Croc, their leader, had agreed to a public stand against Ykor's decision, though he had warned that their involvement would come at a cost. The Karate, with their peaceful nature, had surprisingly remained on the fence, still undecided about risking their fragile neutrality. But the most promising support had come from Sulamir, the Vrel representative, who had quietly started working behind the scenes, sending subtle messages to sway the less certain council members. Jessie was counting on those whispers. She glanced at the clock at the side of the room, an ancient timepiece from Earth, a reminder of what was at stake. The vote was imminent. If they failed today, the future of humanity would be sealed. But if they succeeded, it would not only shift the power dynamic of the Council, it would ignite something far larger, a message to the galaxy that Earth would not be easily erased. Representatives of the Galactic Council, Ikora's voice rang out across the room, cold and calculated. We are here today to finalize the vote regarding the future of humanity in our collective governance. The resolution is clear. Humanity, with all due respect, is not yet ready to be counted among the higher powers of the galaxy. Jessie's pulse quickened, but she stood tall, staring directly at the Grand Emissary. She was not afraid of him anymore. Ikor continued, his voice laced with disdain. The Council has reached a unanimous decision. Humanity is to remain subordinate. This vote will finalize that decision. The matter is closed. A murmur rippled through the room, but Jessie could see the cracks forming in the Council's facade. Not everyone was in agreement. The representatives who had abstained in the initial vote were now looking at each other, their expressions unreadable. Jessie's heart raced as she focused on Talak. His deep sonar eyes were scanning the room, his posture tight with anticipation. Beside him, Sulamir was unmoving, his silent presence a steady force of influence. Then, a small but deliberate shift. Croc, the Gartherii leader, stood from his seat with a soft, mechanical whir of his limbs. The Gartherii delegation has a statement, Croc's voice echoed, commanding attention. He turned to face the entire Council, his insectoid body folding with the grace of a well-oiled machine. We, too, have been observing the decisions of this body. We find the judgment of humanity unsatisfactory. A wave of whispers spread throughout the chamber. Ikora's face twitched, his sharp eyes narrowing as the tension escalated. Jessie's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The spark had been lit. The Gartherii are in agreement with the human representative, Jessie Kane, Croc continued, his many limbs crossing in front of him. Your decision undermines the spirit of unity that this Council claims to uphold. You say humanity is not ready for equality, but who defines readiness? Who dares judge the potential of a species when its strength, resilience, and innovation are undeniable? Jessie's breath caught in her throat. The Gartherii had officially thrown their weight into the fight. This was the moment the Council could not ignore. But she knew Ikor would not give up easily. The Grand Emissary's gaze flicked toward Talak, whose sonar eyes were now alight with a quiet intensity. The karate delegate had not yet spoken, but his presence alone was a statement. Ikora's voice broke the silence, smooth but seething. You have no understanding of the long-term implications of your actions, Croc. Disrupting the balance of this Council could lead to disaster. We will not be swayed by your reckless sentiments. Jessie stood and stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. This isn't about reckless sentiment. This is about survival. Earth has been written off, dismissed, and degraded. But we are not a species to be ignored. We have fought against impossible odds before, and we'll do it again if we have to. The room was still, save for the soft, almost imperceptible hum of the station's systems. For a moment, no one spoke. It was as if the entire Council was waiting for the next move. Jessie's eyes scanned the room, focusing on the faces of those who had yet to decide. The karate were still silent, but they were watching, their presence looming like a storm cloud. You have no idea what humanity has endured, Jessie continued, her voice unwavering. You think you can dismiss us because we've only been a part of this galaxy for a short time. But we've fought for our place in the stars since the beginning. You don't get to decide our worth. Her words hung in the air, daring anyone to challenge them. For the first time, the room felt alive with the weight of her declaration. The Gartherii's support had emboldened her, but it was the sheer force of her will that carried the moment. Sulamir rose slowly, his presence commanding. The Vrel delegate's calm voice filled the room. The Vrel delegation concurs. Humanity has earned the right to stand alongside us, not below. We will not support a decision that weakens the future of the galaxy by ignoring its greatest asset, humanity's will to fight and survive. Jesse's pulse raced. The Vrel were known for their neutrality, and their support would carry great weight. But it wasn't over yet. The council was divided, and the undecided members were now visibly agitated. Jesse glanced at Talak, who was watching everything unfold with calculated precision. His voice, when it finally came, was low and filled with authority. The karate delegation, too, refuses to support this resolution, Talak said, his tone filled with quiet resolve. We have always prided ourselves on peaceful diplomacy, but we will not endorse the oppression of a species whose potential we have witnessed firsthand. The room erupted. Shouts of protest from Ikor's supporters clashed with murmurs of agreement from the others. Jessie stood tall, watching the chaos unfold, but her heart was steady now. The tide had turned. In the midst of the clamor, Ikor's voice rose, sharp and bitter. You dare defy the decision of the council? You are all risking everything for a single species. This will not go unpunished. But Jessie's gaze did not falter. You were the one who risked everything when you underestimated us, Ikor. And now you'll see just how wrong you were. As the debate raged on, Jessie knew they weren't out of the woods yet. But the balance had shifted. The battle for Earth's place in the galaxy was far from over, but for the first time, the Council's confidence was shaken. The fight for humanity's future had only just begun. The Council chamber was a battlefield of words. The air vibrated with tension as voices clashed and power struggles simmered just beneath the surface. Jessie stood at the center of it all, her hands steady, her resolve unwavering. This was the climax, the final moment. Humanity's future hung in the balance, and for the first time, it felt as though the weight was not pressing down on her alone. It was a collective burden, shared by those who had rallied to her cause. Ikor's eyes burned with fury, his voice a low growl as he spoke. You have all been swayed by this human representative. You choose to throw the galaxy into disarray, to risk war, all for the sake of one species who has yet to prove its worth. This is madness. Jessie's heart pounded, but she stood firm. The arguments, the long hours of deliberation, the sleepless nights, they had all led to this. She had spoken truth, and now the council was torn. The influence of the Gartherii, the Vrel, and the Karate had shifted the vote, but there was still one more obstacle. She met Ikor's gaze with an unwavering calm. No, Ikor. What is madness is thinking that the galaxy can continue to thrive by excluding humanity. You may call it a risk, but we're willing to face it. And unlike you, we will not bow to fear. The chamber was silent. Even the Grand Emissary seemed stunned by her defiance. It wasn't the words that had cut him, it was the strength behind them, the humanity that they embodied. Jessie wasn't speaking for herself anymore. She was speaking for every human who had ever fought for a place in the stars, for every sacrifice made, for every moment that had built Earth into the force it had become. Croc, the Gartherii leader, was the first to speak after the silence stretched thin. His deep, resonant voice filled the chamber. The Gartherii delegation stands by its decision. We are no strangers to war, but we are not blind to the truth. Humanity has proven itself. It is not your place to decide their fate, Ikor. Jessie's chest tightened at Croc's words, but it was the sound of Sulamir's voice that caused a shiver to run through her. The Vrel delegate's quiet strength had always been a constant, and now, his support was undeniable. The Vrel agree with the Gartherii, Sula said, his voice almost too soft for the gravity of the moment. This council's decision is a betrayal, not just of humanity, but of the principles it was founded on. There is no room for fear here. Only progress. Ikor's lips pressed into a thin, contemptuous line. His fingers drummed against the podium in a rhythmic, almost mechanical motion. You will regret this. You all will. His words were venomous, dripping with contempt, but he was losing ground. The council was no longer on his side. Talak's sonar eyes flicked toward Jesse, his voice cutting through the tension like a sharp blade. The karate delegation has long believed that true peace comes from mutual respect, and humanity, as you've all witnessed, is capable of much more than simple survival. We stand with them. The weight of Talak's words hit harder than any weapon could. The karate were known for their neutrality, their emphasis on diplomacy, and their refusal to take sides in most conflict. For them to speak out so decisively was a clear signal that the tide had turned. Jesse felt the shift in the room. The undecided members, who had been waiting for the council's decision to solidify, were now looking around, their expressions filled with uncertainty. Some were even nodding, their previous doubts dissolving like mist in the wake of such powerful declarations. Ikora's gaze flickered across the room, his mind calculating, but there was no escape from the inevitability of the moment. The council was fracturing, and his once solid grip on power was slipping. You think this will change anything? Ikora spat, his voice rising. You believe the galaxy will bow to your human will? This is not how things work. The galaxy's strength lies in unity, in order. You will never belong. Jessie's pulse quickened, but she didn't back down. She stepped forward, letting her words ring out with the weight of 1,000,000 human dreams. The galaxy's strength lies in its diversity, Ikora. In its ability to adapt, to evolve. Humanity is not some fragile thing to be discarded. We are the future. Her declaration struck like a lightning bolt, and for the first time, she saw cracks in Ikora's impenetrable exterior. The other council members were no longer just passive observers. They were engaged now. The vote, which had seemed a foregone conclusion just hours earlier, was now in doubt. I will not let this happen, Ikora snarled, his eyes burning with fury. If you want war, then let it be war. But know this, when the galaxy comes for you, it will show no mercy. Jesse's gaze hardened. You don't get to make that choice. We do. There was a beat of silence, and then the voice of Tharvok, a long-standing ally of Ikora's, broke through the tension. Enough, he said, his voice deep and resonant. This will not be settled through threats or bluster. It is time for the vote. The room fell into hushed silence as the delegates moved to cast their vote. The moment felt like an eternity as Jessie stood in the center, her chest tight with anticipation. It was as if time itself had slowed, the weight of the decision pressing on her like a tangible force. She could hear the faint hum of the station's power systems in the background, the distant echo of her own heartbeat. One by one, the votes were cast. The Gartherii, the Vrel, the Karate. Each one of their votes came in, a silent testament to the power of unity and the strength of conviction. Jessie's eyes moved across the room, searching for the remaining undecided delegates. She had no control over them, but she had given them a reason to think, to question, to consider something greater than the status quo. Finally, the last vote was cast. The room was electric with the unspoken tension as the results were displayed. Humanity had won. Jessie's breath caught in her throat as the words appeared on the screen. The vote had passed. The council had decided that humanity would no longer be subjugated. They would stand as equals, as sovereigns among the stars. It was a moment of victory, yes. But it was also a beginning. The road ahead would not be easy. Ikora's words rang in her ears. This would not go unpunished. But for the first time, she felt the weight of those words as a challenge, not a threat. Humanity is here to stay, Jessie whispered under her breath, her eyes shining with a mixture of disbelief and triumph. She turned to face the delegates who had stood by her, her allies who had helped her achieve the impossible. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it was hers to shape. And that future, she knew, would not be defined by fear.